Hello everyone, welcome to Kings Talk, presented by Cap City Crown. This is Tony. With me, as always, we've got John. I don't know how else to put it. I'm at a loss for words with this team. I'm not even really going to go into their games in the past. I'm just kind of so focused on Monday night's loss to the Bulls that's all I can think about right now. In the world of the Kings, how disappointing this team is. You know, someone told me they're beyond mad at this point. They're just sad. That's just how this team is making us feel right now. They're just... Yeah, you know, I mean, I think how it's been for quite some time is one step up, two steps back. You know, they go in, they have a team meeting, they go into Minnesota without De'Aaron Fox, the number one seed in the West, and they beat the Timberwolves. And then you go home against a subpar Bulls team, and you blow a 20-point lead to them. I don't know. How are you feeling, man? I'm just struggling over here today.
I'm more than okay. I'm fine.
You are?
The team. This is yeah, man. This is the team we knew. This is nothing new. I hate the fact that we have to have redundant conversations every week about the same thing over and over again. And maybe this whole thing, especially with the players meeting and the timing and the tightening of the playoff kind of order, 20 games left or so. Like, that all makes it a really illustrative example of the same old thing, that the Kings are not at a point where they are reliable or resilient enough to maintain the type of championship grit that is necessary to be anything that they want to be. So that's nothing new. I mean, this is kind of a little bit of an overreaction just from everybody. You end a playoff drought and you actually are on pace to do something pretty great at some point. Of course, it's not going to happen this year. Nobody thought it was going to happen this year. You're maintaining a record that's roughly the same, and the competition around you has just gotten better, so your standings are far lower. So much depends also on the development of Keegan Murray, the fact that the Kings need to add another defender. There's so many things that we've been talking about that just need to be done that we're not going to get done this season. Maybe some of that could have gotten done at the trade deadline. It didn't. But who the hell is sad? Why are you sad about this? You're fine. You're doing okay. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they got something else going on in their lives. But the Kings are going to be okay. Trust me, the Kings are going to be fine. I think the thing that they just need to focus on is just trying to close out and learn from this experience. Just keep getting better. Don't let this stuff happen. And this offseason will be big. But that's been the storyline this whole time. It's just getting to that moment where people don't want to accept that because it's March, we're getting into the playoff swing of things eventually. And it's a bummer. You get that taste of the playoff glory. You take the defending champions at the time to 7 games. You want to get back in it. You think you're going to do so well. There's been many franchises whose fan bases have thought that. It takes a little bit. And that's not an excuse to anybody, but in the grand scheme of things, this is exactly kind of where we thought they'd be. It's disappointing. There's a lot of things that I think maybe are a little recurring that are troubling, but it's not anything that I think is going to be, tied to this team, going forward too far. And if it is, then you got an issue about who your stars are, who's the foundation of your roster, your coaching staff, stuff like that. But right now, it's easy to manufacture stuff because it's hard to pin down anything specific other than growing pains like we have talked about last week, the week before that. Hell, the last several months.
Are these more than just growing pains, though? I mean, it just feels like, I think everyone's so frustrated, including myself. I can overreact sometimes. I understand, as we've said on this podcast a million times, the Kings aren't winning the championship this year. But and I think a lot of people were expecting this team to take that next step towards getting better. And I think at this point, they've regressed from the team they were last year. And on top of that, I think statistically, they are officially at this point in the season doing worse than they were last year. I mean, it's losing these games after games after games after they blow big leads late in the game. It's yeah, they can take that into next year and learn from it for sure. But man, why didn't they learn it over the first 2 or 3 games they blew? Why are they still doing this? And especially to a Bulls team, without Levine, who don't or aren't even above 500. It's just sad. It just feels like they're going backwards from where they were last year. Growing pains, they're just not growing. They're shrinking, if anything. The resiliency, the fight that they had from last year is just gone, and I feel like that's a little concerning. And everything can change next year. But, I mean, this is what's presented to us. That's the facts right now.
Like, you're talking about a team that is just failing to execute in a way that can allow them to be consistent. And that is, like, the biggest sign of just immaturity to me. And maybe that doesn't get better. And maybe that this whole house of cards thing falls down. Or maybe it's just the beginning of building something strong. I don't know. It's hard to say at this point. So it's hard to be like all down on it and be completely like tearing your hair out over it. And I mean, I think one of the biggest indications of the fact that and my point, I guess, is I'm not trying to run cover for anybody. I'm just trying to say everybody needs to like relax. like in the grand scheme of things, just relax. And I can tell that people need to relax because you read comments online, you read thoughts on different forums, stuff like that. Everything's going in every freaking direction. Blame, outrage, desperation, despondency, everything for different reasons. It's incoherent. And I think at this point, it's almost kind of growing pains for the fan base and those analyzing the team as well. I don't know. I can't really say anything more than that other than the fact that I don't know what's different now than a couple of weeks ago. It just feels like they're still in the same process and the same stage, and it's hard to really make any conclusions. And you just have to trust what's going on and let the chips fall where they may, and then you can critique. I don't know if there are any facts out there other than the fact that we don't know where this team's going, but this team is pretty much going to end up doing the same thing we thought they were going to do this year in a lot of ways. I mean, you can point out specific things, but I mean, we talked about projections at the beginning of the season, everything like that. Everything's kind of going the way we imagined. I mean, is it not?
No, you're totally right. I mean, it is. I mean, I don't think I had them over 50 games or maybe just around 50 games won. That's kind of where they are, just like last year. So, I mean, that's fair. But yeah, I think the word you just used was trust a lot, or just you used was trust. And I feel like people are starting to lose trust in McNair, in Brown too, a lot. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration's coming from too. A lot of critiques, especially on Brown and his coaching this year. So I think that's where a lot of this anger and this disappointment is coming from on top. And they're starting to lose that trust that they had last year. And going into this season. And I get that it's a little bit over, and it's an overreaction. But I mean, we talked about it last week on the podcast. It's with the way the Warriors and Lakers are playing, who we play tonight. I mean, this team they're looking at a play-in spot right here, a play-in berth. The way they've been playing on top of that themselves, if they get bounced if they go into the play-in and get bounced in that round, I mean, McNair and Brown are not going to go totally on like the hottest of seats entering next season, but I mean, their butts are going to be a little warm. You can't go from ending a playoff drought to getting bounced in the first round of the play-in, or even the first round of the playoffs. It'd still be kind of a disappointment, but it's still more on par with what we're expecting. I mean, maybe this season we thought they could go at least to the second round, but people's concerns they're rising about those two running the team, and I mean, I can't totally not blame them on top of that either. Like there's been some concerns, and yeah, they can turn it around by next year for sure. I don't know. I know a lot of people are starting to look at Brown and be like, okay, I don't know. I know it's a little harsh, but do you have any thoughts on Brown?
I mean, I would just say this. Again, it's the same thing we said when they didn't do anything at the trade deadline. If they don't make any moves in the offseason, if they go into next year with essentially the same roster and they're doing the same shit they're doing this year, yeah, absolutely. Turn on the seat warmer. Full blast. Get that booty warm. Whatever you just said. I don't think you said that, but I think the fact that McNair especially has taken a very conservative approach, which is fair to say it's conservative,
mm-hmm.
I think that lends him a little bit of a leash up until that point, up until the end of this upcoming offseason, to kind of just see what happens, because you can't fault someone for, okay, well, that was a strike, but it wasn't. That would have been a little grounder to shortstop. I hate to do the baseball analogies all the time, but it's just, that's kind of the nature of a front office in a lot of ways. They refer to big hauls and trades as home runs, as hitting a home run or whatever. It makes a lot of sense. But I think if he's going to be playing it conservative the way he is, then he deserves a little bit of time to see where that goes. I think that's the nature of that. But again, it's like at this point, March 2024, it's hard to give a final grade. It's hard to give a judgment at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to defer from the conversation, but it's like we talked about that. I think at the All-Star break, like, is Mike Brown potentially going to be on the hot seat or anything like that? And in short, that's it. He could be, but I don't know. And a lot of it does come down to the players. So a lot of the blame, if anything, I think would get put on McNair. But again, he's the one that's playing it the most conservatively. So I guess he's got to be given a little bit of time. And like I said, that goes up until the end of this offseason. If, again, nothing happens at the end of this offseason, then you're really looking at a kind of a hot seat for McNair, especially,
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in a lot of ways, Brown has done an interesting job this season. I think a lot of it, you can maybe fault him for a lot of things. But again, it's hard to argue with the facts that in basketball and any professional sport, it comes down to the players. And being super hands-on, it's just, that can kind of become shooting yourself in the foot in a way. You cannot try to control it too much when it's the players at the end of the day that's driving the bus. You can't be that backseat driver. You just have to put them in the best position to get where they need to go. And I don't think in that regard he's done a poor job,
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just now that the players called for a players meeting. Like, okay, so there's actually some growth. Was the players meeting going to change anything about what the team does this year? No, but it does mean something for what the final product should be. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying it's a process. It's going to be like this. This is an awkward stage. I think we compared this to like almost being like a college student. It seems like there's a little bit of balance between responsibility and being young and trying to sort that out. And you see a team that thrives off of chaos and cramming for like studying for a test almost, but they can hardly get up out of bed before noon, which, I struggle with that as well, but, no, I don't know. I'm not trying to make this seem like everybody needs to chill out, man, but I kind of am saying that at the same time.
Fair enough. It is a process. Trust the process, as they say in Philadelphia. It's just a annoying part of the process that we're going through right now. And people are going to have frustration over it. And that's just kind of where we are right now. I agree. There's a lot more hope next year. But, frustration is in the air, man, in Kingsland. And like I said, I can't blame them. This is, Monday's night. As a diehard Kings fan, it's just, I hated watching them lose and, when they sucked in the 2010s and stuff, it's watching them lose is never easy. It's always going to be frustrating, but I feel like we all feel, when I say all Kings fans feel like they're playing below the level they're capable of playing. And, I think that's what's most frustrating, especially after what we saw them do last year. It's not like they went all the way. They broke a playoff drought, got bounced in the first round, but it does feel like we're trending to be worse than that. But hey, I get it. The process, we just keep going through it. I think we'll all be a little more acceptable of having overreactions going into next season if they're still performing at this level.
Yeah, I think also, too, it's like just to kind of give a little breathing room, I guess, to McNair and Brown. It's like just centering on this last game. Fox looked great in his first game back after missing 2. He was flying around on defense. He was doing a lot on offense. He looked as spry as he has all season. But his fourth quarter, played all 12 minutes, horrendous. 0 of 4 from the field, including 3 missed from the 3-point line. He went 1 of 2 at the free throw line. scored just 1 point in those 12 minutes with 3 turnovers and 1 assist. And, I think you can remember one specific turnover that maybe made you want to gouge your eyes out. He spoke after the game. And I do give him some credit. And maybe this is because he set a low bar. Because how many times? There's been like 2, maybe 3 times where Keon Ellis goes out to talk to the media after like a rough loss, such as the one that they had against the Bulls on Monday night. But, both Fox and Sabonis were the 2 players that went up to the podium and spoke to the media. But I have to be honest, Fox is a guy that's been in the league for 6-7 years, whatever it is, talks to the media all the time, is the face of the franchise, never really seems uncomfortable at all, seems 100% comfortable in front of the media. But there was something about his press conference on Monday that just kind of felt like he wasn't 100% comfortable. I wouldn't say he was like uncomfortable, but his answers were containing a lot of run-on sentences and thoughts. He'd kind of run from thought to thought. And I think that fourth quarter, the way he was acting in the press conference, which I can't even really ascribe to what feeling it was, whether it was him not necessarily taking the fullest accountability for something, or if he was like shell-shocked by what had happened, whatever the case may be, something still points me to the idea that Fox lacks something as a leader. And I keep bouncing between this binary between, he needs to step up as a leader, and, he can only step up as a leader in so many ways because you can't force a guy to be somebody he's not. You can't force a guy who's naturally kind of reserved to be this vocal leader. And I'm kind of starting to go back towards the former more because there's something that just seems so glaring about Fox in terms of what's lacking from his leadership. And I know this is another one of those redundant topics that we talk about all the time, but hey, it's the same shit, different day with this team. So I don't really know what to say because I feel like there's so many different things to talk about. But De'Aaron Fox, bad fourth quarter, kind of a weird press conference, really underlining the whole lack of leadership conversation that's been had all season.
Yeah. I don't know, dude. His leadership has been so underwhelming. Like, at least last year, he was backing it up with that Clutch Player of the Year award, and just playing the fourth quarter in general, and leading them to that playoff drought ending. He's just different this year. He's not. He's had some good fourth quarters, but we're close to the level he was playing at last year, which I feel like was kind of his leadership in a way. But now it's just, he doesn't have that. Like, when they actually need a guy to step up and just be a leader on like so many fronts, he's just not. That's my biggest critique of him this season for sure. He had that rough spell in February. Or was it January? It's February, right? All these months are starting to blend together now. I
feel like it was... I was like, wasn't it both?
Maybe it was. Yeah, it probably was. But it's just almost like his just head's not totally in it. So it's just like an office job for him. Seems like sometimes. Where it's just like, you know what? Like, I have to make a living. I don't want to be here, but I have to because I have to make money. And I don't really care what happens anywhere else as long as I get my work done and I get my paycheck at the start of every month. That's just like Fox's mentality, it feels like. He's like, you know what? I'm here to play basketball. We lost, so what? That's what he's been giving me all season. He still plays very well. And he's had, you can say you see his heart in it sometimes, but sometimes it's just completely gone. And you wish he just cared more. That's my biggest critique on top of him not being a leader is that his heart just doesn't seem into it. You want him to have a drive and get his team better, fire him up, right? Isn't that what every great player has done for their team? He just lacks that. And like we've said for so many months now, this team it's going to be hard for them to climb that hill without someone leading them up it. And they don't have anyone. And they're looking for Fox, and he's just on the back just playing on his phone as they walk up it. That's what it feels like. I don't know. I wish we had some more like I wish we heard more from the locker room on how the leadership is. But I mean, all eyes are on Fox when it comes from the fans, right?
I mean, I almost get a sense he just doesn't grasp how important that is, how that's required of him. It's almost like someone needs to like really break that down to him, because you're talking about a guy that is nonchalant. I don't think he just thinks about it as an office job. I don't think you're that good at it if you just think about it as an office job. I mean, you have to work really freaking hard. You know?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's what he's doing. I'm just saying that's like the feel he gives off. I know I don't want to take anything away from him. Definitely. No, he just given to him. No, I know he worked his ass off.
Right. But I always go back to when Mike Brown was like pleading for someone to step up as a leader, and he told the story of his first year in Cleveland with a young LeBron James, like taking over a huddle. And I always think about that. It's just like, that was like Mike Brown trying to tell De'Aaron Fox, like, this might be the missing piece. This might be the missing piece for you. This could potentially, given some other things around you, be the missing piece for this team. And that was a couple months ago. And De'Aaron Fox didn't call the players meeting, He didn't do that. It just doesn't seem like he grasps it. It doesn't seem like he totally understands and accepts the idea that he needs to step up in that regard. Because I really think he'd put in a better effort if he did. And I don't know if that's him ignoring it. I don't think there's screws missing in his head. I mean, he's a smart guy. I can't imagine that it's any lack of ability or any lack of interest. I just think that it's kind of going over his head. And someone's got to let him know. Or somehow he's got to have something that's going to wake him the hell up in that regard. Because I'm like firmly fixed now. Again, after bouncing between a critical and a little bit more of a sympathetic viewpoint, I'm kind of settling on the critical viewpoint, because, I mean, what the hell? This is kind of ridiculous. This does seem like something that's stalling out in a way that I would have kind of imagined would have been sort of easy to get on the up and up. And this season kind of seems like it's just stagnated in that vocal, being the leader you need to be kind of thing for De'Aaron Fox.
Who called the players only meeting?
Trey Lyles. The way Fox described it was Lyles like came up with the idea, and then like I think Fox backed him. So it's like there's seriously, which almost underlines the point even more. You get the lobbying effort of De'Aaron Fox, like that carries the most weight. Yeah. I mean, not to say that they did like a players meeting wasn't going to happen, but
probably meant a little more when.
Why is it the first time that there was a players meeting called?
I know, for real.
Like, what the hell? Lyles was like, that's never happened since I've been here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's never happened. So it didn't even happen at any point last season. It didn't happen.
I guess it didn't really need too much last year.
I guess not. No, that's true. And then it's a little tough at the close of the season with Alvin Gentry as head coach. That was a certain situation. So, okay, it makes sense. But it could have happened earlier this season, I think is what you were just about to say.
Yeah. I mean, none has ever been called. Yeah, it could have happened earlier. It's better late than never, right? But like I said, I was going to say, it's like hard to even, like we're talking about it now. And it was like such a big moment. Like it's so funny if we recorded before the game on Monday, we'd be like the players only meeting. We go in and beat Minnesota without Fox. Like this team is rejuvenated. They know what's needed from them. And then they just go in and lose to the Bulls at home. It's just like, man, just nothing's going to help this team at this rate. It's just, they're inconsistent. And it's just going to bring us back to the conversation we had to start off this podcast.
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
although I have to say, if we did record after that Minnesota win, I was going to come in and be a Debbie Downer, because I was going to be like, yeah, but Anthony Edwards didn't play the second half.
That's a good point. He didn't. But hey, you know what? They still battled. I don't care.
Yeah, you know what?
Anthony Edwards or not. Right. Jimmy Butler didn't play, and we still lost. Zach LaVine didn't play. We still lost. Keep the list going. Who else did we lose to without players?
You could go on and on and on and on.
It was honestly, to even reverse what you're going to say, it'd be like even Anthony Edwards was out and we won. That's even better.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's an interesting angle.
Yeah. But, he only had like 2 points. I mean, his head probably wasn't in the right space anyway.
What was up with him? Why did he leave?
His kid was being born.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so he left. So good for him, and I would understand. But, yeah, I don't know, man. That just brings me back. Fox, his team, just all disappointing. I mean, kind of talking about that leadership, and we've always, it's funny. It's the three guys. Trey Lyles called it. And we always kind of talked about him as, probably the more vocal leader on the team that we've seen on the court. Fox is the leader we want him to be, and if it's not Fox, then it probably should be Sabonis. And if we're looking at that Timberwolves game, and then we found out the players' meeting happened, I don't think we found out the players' meeting happened until after the Timberwolves game, right? Or did we find out before? I don't remember.
I think it was something. I think the public really didn't find out until after the Timberwolves game, but I think Chris Biederman might have known about it beforehand. Or maybe there were some pregame media sessions probably where it got out, because it happened the night before.
Okay, yeah. But then I noticed Sabonis in that game was kind of barking a little more at his players. So when I heard about the players meeting, I'm like, oh, okay, I still don't know what was discussed during it, unless you do. But I'm like, okay, maybe they told Sabonis, hey, Kenan gave him the green light to be more of that vocal leader on the court. So I don't know, maybe I didn't really see it as much in the Bulls game. Sabonis didn't have the greatest of games, and he fouled out. And he still had a double-double. But I don't know. Maybe they're trying to transfer that leadership to someone. Maybe we'll see Sabonis take reign of that going forward. I don't know. Who knows if that was even discussed during the players' meeting. But I did notice that in that Timberwolves game, he did seem a little more vocal on the court. It didn't always seem like the nice guy about it, because he always seems kind of no, it's okay, do this. This time he seemed a little more mean to his team, which maybe they need. But
you're talking about a change in tone more than anything.
Yeah,
because I do think he talks all the time. I think he's really good about being vocal on the floor. The only idea we have of what was said in the players only meeting was that it was kind of reinforcing the idea of coming together and holding each other accountable in a positive way, because everybody's going for the same goal. Kind of just reinforcing that. Yada, yada. So maybe that emphasized a freedom to be a little bit more stern about it. That could have been the case. Also, it's just that's a big game. I mean, you're on Minnesota's home floor. You were the first team to win on that home floor. That was not the Timberwolves. And you're the only team that's beaten them twice on their home floor. It was also higher intensity. But I'm sure it opened up the ability to be a little tougher about it. Had to have. And I think that's important, because Sabonis we talk about just Fox needing to, he has a lot of room to grow. I mean, Sabonis can always do stuff too, because Sabonis has the same star power. And honestly, he leads the league in triple doubles. He's one of the most respectable players, especially in the way that he brings effort all the time. He should have free range to just be able to do whatever the hell he wants and say whatever the hell he wants. And maybe he is too nice, but I don't know. It's hard to have that discussion with all the stuff with De'Aaron Fox, but it's an interesting observation.
Talking about that Timberwolves game, did you hear Jaden McDaniels, what he said after the game?
I did. Yeah, that's just stupid. Why do you say that?
Yeah, for those who don't know, he basically said he's not worried about the Kings, and that if they face them in a 7-game series, he thinks they can beat them 4 straight.
First of all, never say that.
Yeah.
Because if you do play them in the playoffs, that's free motivation. And 2, that does sound like you're a sore fucking loser. I'm sorry. You sound like a sore loser, buddy.
So weird. The only team to beat them twice on their home court, like you were saying, and are up 2-1, up 2-1 on the season series against them. I don't even know if there's another game.
So when the Kings are jousting for first place, they'll have the tiebreaker.
No, what's even more interesting is that they are they are in the playoff play-in range. So they have a very realistic chance of facing the first seed.
That's true.
In the West. That'd be kind of a fun little story. That'd be the team I'd want to face at this rate, free motivation, and a team did the Timberwolves scare you? I feel like a lot of teams at the top of the West.
No, you know why the Timberwolves don't scare me, Tony?
Why?
Because anytime the Kings play small, they just make Minnesota look stupid playing 3 bigs. What were they doing in overtime?
Yeah.
They had Naz Reid Cat
Yeah,
and
that was weird.
Gobert. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I don't get that. Maybe that works against other teams, but don't do that against the Kings. Maybe they'd figure it out. I think the Kings would win that series in 6.
Yeah, I think so too. They just don't scare me. Neither does OKC though. I'm like, how are you guys top of the West? And we're so far down.
OKC's almost just like OKC's just like a more developed version of the Kings last year. Like it wasn't like a one season jolt. It was kind of a multi-year process, and they've earned where they're at, I guess, in a way. But it's like, come playoff time, they still need to earn their stripes, you know? So I wouldn't be worried about them. I could see them being the 3rd seed getting knocked out in the first round.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Even, I mean, I'm not saying the Nuggets wouldn't be terrifying to play, but
the Kings match up well against them.
Match up very well. They almost swept the season series against them. They were one game away from going 4-0. But then you get like the Clippers, the Pelicans. It's like, even the Suns.
Oh, yeah, that's rough. I don't like the Suns.
I wouldn't mind the Suns, but I'm like, I just feel like they just have our number.
See, I think going back to Denver, I think Denver would win a playoff series against the Kings just because they just won a championship, that whole thing. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be a really good series because I just like the whole idea of like 2 centers being the hubs of the offense. Like, there's so much similarities between them. Like, that's why the Kings match up well against them, not in the sense that they will dominate them, because the times that they dominated or played really well against them, you know, Denver had like 2 starters missing, and we saw how different that was.
But who's that an advantage for? The way the Kings play?
Yeah, maybe. back to that angle. But yeah, I mean, like, it just goes to show that it's like, it would be a good matchup in the sense that would be a good matchup for people to watch. I mean, damn, you know? Mm-hmm. And you talk about the Kings maybe being like the 8th, 7th seed when the playoff bracket begins. You know, you could play OKC, you could play Minnesota, you could play Denver too. I mean, that 3-horse race at the top is interesting. So I think that'd be fun. And honestly, the Clippers, I don't know about the Clippers. I feel like the way that the Kings played in the last game against the Clippers almost, and I know that they ended up kind of doing that thing where they get your hopes up and then, you know, crush your dreams the next game. Mm-hmm. I know they went through that process after losing to Miami in the following game, but still, I think the way that they played on that Sunday night game last week against the Clippers, kind of like, it's not the same thing so much as like the Pelicans, because they avoided the going down 0-3 against them on the season series. They played really well. They played probably the best game they played. And I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like that's the type of series that the Kings would get up for. It's like, 4 future Hall of Famers or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, I could see the Kings just playing out of their minds for that series and then just getting swept in the following series.
That's fair.
But I don't know. Maybe that's just kind of conjecture. I don't know. I feel like the Pelicans and the Suns are 2 teams that I think the Kings should really want to avoid.
It's so weird the Pelicans just have our number. So weird. Not saying they're not good, but I mean,
I don't know. It's like Brandon Ingram is just like always so good against them, and then Zion's always just a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, more about the Kings. A guy that got the start while Fox was out. Against Minnesota, actually, and they won. And then didn't get any playing time the next game. Keon Ellis. And I not to say Davion Mitchell hasn't been playing a lot better lately. But, I mean, I think that it's not like I'm saying to start Keon, because I was going to say he's 4-0 as a starter, and obviously that's not making a case for him to be a starter, but I mean, good things happen, it feels like, when he gets the minutes. Do you think he should be getting more time? Granted, Davion's been playing well, but something about Keon.
It might have been Davion who described it. It might have been Davion and Mike Brown describing Keon as setting the tone in that game defensively. And he always has like several steals a game. He gets his hand on the ball so many times. He's so disruptive. I mean, I think there's always an argument for Keon Ellis should play more. And he had those like early season rotational minutes and the spot starts for Fox and all that. And Mike Brown described that, you know, kind of whole process of like, and then I took him out of the starting. I kind of took him out of the rotation, not because he was playing badly, But because other guys kind of stepped up and, you kind of look at it from the way it's like, okay, he's a two-way player, all of that. Like, okay, that kind of makes some sense. And Mike Brown was like, he never really got his head down, which was really easy for a young player to do. And even when he kind of got some spot minutes here and there, he didn't play super well, which was kind of true. And he still kind of stayed with it. And then he kind of had that night out of nowhere in Minnesota when Fox wasn't good to go again. And, I just think for Keon Ellis, it's like, it's just a matter of time. And I almost feel like he's just earned it at this point, because it's like you go through all that trial. There's like a part of you that wants you to go, okay, well, let's just put him in a position to be ready to go and be a rotational impact guy all season next year. It's like, yeah, maybe you want to do that, but it's like this guy's like passing every test almost with like flying colors. And he does change the game when he goes in there. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like the way it worked because Davion's playing well. So Davion's going to have his backup point guard spot, especially when you start thinking about, well, okay, if you want to keep Davion, that's good for that. And if you want to trade Davion, that's good for that. He's got to play either way, for his confidence or for his value. And the thing that you saw, Duarte only had like 5 minutes against Minnesota, and Keon played most of that game. And then Duarte played more against Chicago and Keon didn't play at all against Chicago. Now, I don't know if that had anything to do with matchups. Off the top of my head, I couldn't really pinpoint why that would be the case, but maybe it's just that kind of thing where they're just going to try to get Keon involved as much as they can. But, I mean, it's hard to do that when Davion's playing well. Duarte's even kind of played pretty well for a little bit. I mean, I still think he's a little up and down, but, Keon's going to get his minutes, I think. I think he's passed every test. I think it's just kind of tough at this point. I don't know. I mean, I do just kind of think that he's always going to kind of play back seats to third-year players like Duarte and Davion in terms of minutes. If those guys are playing adequately, they're going to get the nod. But I think that serves to Keon's strengths almost, because what has he done all year? He's stayed ready for the most part. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I mean, you kind of did, you kind of didn't. It's just an interesting little topic, or just a thought to have about Keon. He just seems to be so good when he's in. And it's not like spectacular, but he just does seem to make that difference. He had 5 steals against Minnesota, got the win against a tough Minnesota team in a tough arena to play in, and then he just comes back and gets 0 minutes. It just seems like, especially in that fourth quarter when the Kings really started struggling, maybe that's not the right time to bring him in, but I don't know. I think it's just worth mentioning.
Yeah. Well, it also raises an interesting point, because one of the key takeaways to this is the fact that Keon and Davion are playing well. And if both are playing well, maybe there's a world where there's some vision that both of them can be kind of part of the core going forward. And I'm not saying that either guy could ever replace Malik Monk. But in terms of upgrading the team the way that they need to be upgraded, there's a world where instead of bringing back Monk, and there's also a world where you may not be able to bring back Monk because his price tag will just be so high, where you're going to have to put that money into maybe more the wing position or the forward position rather than the guard position. And then all of a sudden you've got Davion and Keon that you can kind of rely on and shuffle around, maybe get another guy. I mean, those guys kind of might open up an opportunity to upgrade via free agency or trade, in terms of the way the money works out in cap space, to upgrade in positions that they really need to. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get too much into that because it'd have to be really good, because just letting Monk walk would be kind of crazy regardless. And it'd probably rely on him walking himself. But I don't know. I think it sets up for an interesting thing, and it gives the Kings a little bit more to play with and think about. The fact that both of them are playing well and making a situation difficult, because that's kind of the case here. It's like, okay, the Kings, we talk about these things going up and down, and we're coming off their loss to Chicago. Well, you still have the positives of, like, everybody on the bench seems to be playing well. Davion, Monk has had a cold second half against Chicago. He had a cold first half against Minnesota, but finished strong, But he's still playing like a 6th man of the year. You got Keon pushing for minutes. You've got Huerter doing pretty well, at least the best he's done all season. Lyles is the co-6th man of the year, the 7th man of the year, if you will. And then you've got Alex Len, who's been pretty solid. So it's like the whole bench has been playing well. And I don't know. Again, that's kind of tailing into a different conversation that is just kind of more of an observation than anything. But it makes things interesting because there's going to be probably a lot of change or potential for change with Monk's pending free agency at the guard depth. So with both those guys playing well, it makes it a little more fascinating.
Yeah, I just think it's going to make it easier for the Kings to move Mitchell in the offseason. Ellis has proved that he can assume those backup point guard duties. And although Mitchell has been playing better, his future just doesn't look as bright as what Keon has been showing as that backup point guard and what the Kings need. So, and obviously, I don't think anyone's going to put Ellis or Mitchell, no matter how well they're playing, over Monk. So, I think it's just, Monty's probably just licking his chops like, great, Mitchell's finally breaking out of his slump. Just keep this up for another 2 months, and then he'll be traded in the offseason for a little more of a haul than what we probably would have had to give you up for. So, that's how I kind of see it. But, hey, it's a good problem to have when everyone's playing well, right? But that Monk situation, we'll probably get a lot more into it in the offseason or as we approach it. But, it will be interesting. Are they going to retain him? Does he want to stay? I'm assuming he does, but he's not gonna come cheap. So hey, that's Monty's problem. And Monty, we trust still, right? Or is that still a thing?
I'm not sure. That's up to the internet people. Well, I think also just kind of going back to what Keon's proven and Davion's proven is that role really relies on whether or not you can fit within a system. And the only reason Davion's been playing well is that he's played to his strengths and kind of let it come in a way that's going to just come to him within the system, But I think they got to like Keon more because, okay, Davion's being a little more aggressive, getting inside. He's using his mid-range shot, it seems like, a little bit more, which is a strong suit. And he's kind of mimicking Fox in his ability to attack and push the ball after an opponent's made basket. All things that I think are great. But I still think the Kings would rather have the active hands and the three-point shooting from Keon Ellis.
100%.
And the length, So I think it definitely, just without trying to indulge any other interesting conversation, I 100% agree with you that it just kind of comes down to what we've talked about all season, which is Keon is the guy going forward, and it's all about what Davion's value is going to be. And I think there's a world where if he plays well enough, maybe he could be a chip, probably compared to the draft capital that would be included, a small or moderate sized chip in a fairly big trade, So he's definitely worthwhile for a lot of teams, and they can definitely see what he can do and still do.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. But another guy that I would bring up in terms of, you got to make a move, it's that starting 2-guard position. And I don't want to dog on Huerter too much because, again, it's like his defense hasn't been as bad over the last few months, and he's had some stretches of very good shooting. But you bring up questions of ceiling and what's the most he can offer you. Will he ever be more than he is? And, I'd start this by saying he was disappointed after the loss to Denver last Wednesday for playing just about 18 minutes. Felt he could have helped the team more and could not pinpoint exactly why he wasn't in there. And just looking at the notes from that game, it's pretty clear that it came down to, of course, defense. And the other thing, which is a little more troubling as of late, which was turnovers and trying to do too much. Because, if it was the first game without Fox in those 2 games that he was out with the knee injury. And one of the things about Huerter is on the season, he averages 0.8 turnovers a game. Yet, since the All-Star break, he's had at least 1 turnover in each game, including 3 against Denver last Wednesday and 2 just the other night against Chicago. And he's playing the least minutes he's played all year at 25 minutes a game. He played 27 his rookie year in Atlanta. He's lost the starting job at one point. He's really had his defense under a microscope. And as we've said, and as a lot of people have said, if this team wants to get where they want to be defensively, you might need a better defender at the starting 2-guard position. And you see the turnovers kind of start piling up. And you've seen him kind of facilitate well every now and then. Something to me says that he's trying to do a little too much. Maybe he's pressing a little bit too much. And maybe he knows that there might be a ceiling envisioned above him that's a little closer to the top of his head than he thought, at least in terms of the way he's being evaluated. And I mean, I think this is just underlining, again, another redundant topic, which is I'm not sure you can get much more out of Kevin Huerter.
Unfortunately not. I mean, we talk about a ceiling. He might have reached that last season. 15 points a game on 40% shooting from 3, down to 11 points a game this year on 37% shooting, which is still good from 3. But, I mean, down 4 points a game. I mean, what I've seen from Huerter in 2 seasons now is that he's just a streaky shooter. He's going to be, when he's on, he's on. And it's going to be hard not to play him. But when he's off and he's not shooting well and his defense is already subpar, you know, why would you have him on the court? And I think that's the issue. And even when he's playing his best, if the Kings really want to be a defensive team, right? I mean, who do we always point to as the biggest weakness on that defense? At least in the starting lineup, it's Huerter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that Huerter's clearly the guy that needs to go. And I think that even if you're putting yourself in a position where you can just get rid of Huerter, clear up his money out of the way, re-sign Monk, still have Monk as a 6th man, maybe start someone like Keon Ellis or something like that, a cheaper option. I still think you're going to be miles better, given that the supporting cast is upgraded to some degree. But it felt like there was a point where it really felt like Huerter was going to go, you know? And there's something, and maybe this is just kind of just a weird observation that doesn't really mean anything, and maybe someone can disprove it or whatever, but you know, it really felt like he was going to go. And then the trade deadline was about to come, or it already passed. And then there was a little bit more integration of Kevin Huerter. I feel like there's like that commercial. They used to have that commercial for the game winner in Orlando last season of De'Aaron Fox hitting like the 3/4 court shot.
Yeah.
Now they have one for the Huerter one. I'm like, had that one been there since, if it had, it was really early in the season? And then I also remember there was a game right before the trade deadline. It was like a few days before the trade deadline. It might have been against the Bulls. And Kyle Draper was like, in the beginning of the game, he's like, hey, a little bit later, we're going to feature how great the starting lineup has been together as a unit that's consistent and all that stuff. And it just felt like, okay, like the PR is like saying, okay, people need to stay kind of used to the starting lineup, that this is the way it's going to be. But it was almost like they were just jumping back into it, almost like they were prepared to get rid of it. So, I mean, I just think it's, again, that might not be worth anything, and that might not even be boosting an argument that's already pretty sound. But Kevin Huerter cannot be your starting 2-guard if you were going to try to win a championship. You know, he can work his ass off to try to be something he's not, but he's just going to wind himself. And then his best strength, his shooting, is just not going to be worth anything when the time's needed. And then what is he worth at that point?
It is. Maybe that's something the Hawks realize. I mean, the Hawks were a playoff team for a little bit. And maybe not last year. I don't know how they are this year, but I don't know. Maybe that's why they moved on from him. Granted, they did get DeJounte Murray, but I mean, maybe they realized that and was like, well, he like we said already, like he can be a starter on a playoff team, but championship team or defense wins championships, he's not going to be it. And
he could be a 6th man of the year on or a 7th man of the year on a championship team.
Yeah, that is true. I guess it's something he'd have to accept.
Not at the price tag he's being paid.
Exactly. So, I don't know. It sucks. It's something that, you know, maybe he's going to have to swallow and that Kings fans are swallowing. But, you know, Monty, that's going to be an improvement the Kings need to make for sure. I mean, would you see it as a failure if Monty or if the Kings come into next season with Huerter as their starting shooting guard? Or would you be like, okay, maybe try moving him at the deadline? I
mean, it depends. It depends on what else you do. It does. But, I mean, I think what's a failure is if you are going to move Huerter, and I'm just going to jump the question here, but I'm going to keep it on the notion of failure. If you move Huerter and you get nothing for him, basically, then you just lost everything in terms of that Atlanta trade, everything with Huerter. Because I get maybe why the Kings would have been open to getting Huerter over Atlanta. Atlanta was done with waiting on his defense. They wanted to get the defense in length in the backcourt with Trae Young. And DeJounte Murray was an interesting idea. They're doing what they're doing, whatever. But the Kings were just looking for shooting mostly. They wanted to spread the floor. And that was one of the kind of young, promising, up-and-coming sharpshooters. And for good reason. But maybe they were a little too optimistic about what he could develop into as a two-way player. I think even when they traded for him, it felt like, okay, give him a year or two. I mean, like, maybe he's going to be a little sound on defense. And I didn't even think I realized how bad he was on defense. But, I mean, there were things you read with Hawks analysts and everything like that. Like, the defensive rating when Trae Young and Huerter were on the floor was horrendous. And so it's, like, not all that surprising. So, I don't know. Again, I'm kind of dodging the question there, but I don't know. I mean, that might be one of the biggest critiques of McNair is that Huerter trade.
Yeah.
When things are all said and done.
That's fair. And we're losing a first rounder this year because of it. And he might not even be on the team. And we're talking about how he probably shouldn't. It's true.
Yeah. That's something to be very disappointed about. That's not an overreaction.
No. He's, like we said, reached a ceiling. And, yeah, if they want to get better. There's a lot of things the Kings need to do to get better. And he's one of them.
Yeah.
Replacing.
Indeed. Been a very lively discussion today.
Yeah, well, the Kings, man, they play tonight in Los Angeles against a Lakers team that's just inching themselves closer and closer to where the Kings are in the standings. I don't know. They play the first of a back-to-back as well. They play Thursday as well. Who do they play Thursday? Do you know?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't? I think they play, don't tell me. They play who do they play? I don't know. Spurs? No, I don't think they play the Spurs again. Here, I got it. Oh, they do play the Spurs. I said it. They play the Lakers tonight. They play the Spurs tomorrow, and then they play the Rockets on Sunday. Next three, John. Rest of this week, where are they going? Any predictions?
You know, I don't know. I feel like whenever we do predictions, they do the exact opposite of what I say. So
0-3.
I'm gonna say they go 2-1.
Okay. I mean the Spurs and Rockets.
I'm gonna say that they lose. I'm gonna say they lose. No, I'm gonna say they beat LA, and I'm gonna say they lose to San Antonio, and I'm gonna say they beat Houston.
I like it. That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go 3-0. I'm gonna say 3-0.
3-0. Okay. Well, there you go. They're gonna go 0-3 now.
You know, I think you can go to LA, beat them. And, they should have beat the Bulls. They should have beat the Pistons. They should have beat the Trailblazers. But, I mean, they should beat the Spurs, and they should beat the Rockets. So
Spurs played super energetically and well against them in the last game.
That's fair.
Frankly, could have won that game, and it'll be the second of a back-to-back, and they'd be coming back from LA. I have a bad feeling about that for the Kings.
At least it's LA, though. At least it's not like Minnesota.
True.
They're just coming back from LA.
It's just like a work trip.
Yeah. We'll see, though.
Yeah,
hey, it'll be a fun game tonight, though. Lakers. And an important game. One of the biggest Lakers-Kings games in a minute, really, that actually means something in the standings for both teams. So it's going to be a fun one. Maybe this rivalry will get renewed a little. I don't know. I just want to check the NBA standings real quick. How far back are the Lakers from us? Like a game?
I think they're 2 spots behind them. I think the Mavericks just sit in between them.
You're right.
But I don't know how many games.
A game and a half separates the Kings and Lakers at this moment. 2 games. Man, there's this such a close seed. Between the 6th and the 10th seed is 2.5 games. It's insane.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Just savor the moment, people.
At least the 11th seed is 15 or 5 games back of the 10th seed. So at least the worst the Kings can do is probably the play-in. Unless they just really fall off the wagon. But we'll probably see some non-regular season basketball. I guess could you call that postseason basketball then? The play-in?
Yeah, postseason. It's not that. Yeah, it's postseason.
You couldn't call it the playoffs though.
No, it classifies as the postseason for
Yeah.
sure, but not the playoffs.
But all right. There's how many games left, too?
22?
22 games left. Isaiah Thomas, Rudy Gay. Well, not Rudy Gay on the Kings, I guess, but he was 22.
Flight 22.
Flight 22, baby. I think even Matt Barnes was 22 when he came back to Sac, like at the end of his career.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. I've got nothing else. Let's beat LA, and I think that'll be a good way to forget about Monday's loss if they can go in to Crypto.com Arena. Take down LeBron and company. John, anything to wrap it up?
After hearing the name Donsumu so much the other night, I wanted to say Donsumu, more like don't sue me.
Well, all right. Well, as always, I want to thank you for tuning in. And as always, I want to thank you for tuning in. And until next time, have a good one.